Hey everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Full Funnel Live. We are bringing another important topic today: why sales ignore marketing, and just maybe to share the context with everybody, where it's coming from. We have seen this story multiple times this year, but the recent case that we have observed basically led us to create a good collateral about this topic, about the root reasons, what's happening, why sales are pushing back, and how to fix it. Right, the most important one is how to fix it, so the practical solutions. And what has happened is one marketing leader spent a lot of time on designing the playbooks for sales, investing into new software to track different types of signals, creating different sequences for sales. So that was a solid investment of time and money and resources into implementing this. But guess what has happened on the sales side, right? On the adoption side, um, sales simply were not using it, and were not tracking, not using the software, not using the signals, not using the insights, and not running the sequences as well. So what the company did is that obviously that they automated a couple of the sequences using the modern technology stack, but that didn't yield significant results or significant improvements, right? And the core question that we were discussing with that person is like, why this is happening? So I create, and for sure that this, we can't say that it wasn't valuable. It was. The problem was that sales had completely different perception, right, of the value brought by the marketing team. So this is what we're going to cover today. The main reasons why sales are pushing back, what sales want from marketing, and the practical solutions, how to fix that misalignment. And meanwhile, let us know, guys, where you're all coming from. We're again broadcasting from sunny and warm Spain. Hi, Carlin. Good to see you again. Hi, Thailand. Let us know, guys, where you all join us from. And just type in the chat your city or country. Istanbul. Great to see you. Vlad's favorite city.
Wow. I spent a week there with my family and we had an earthquake. Not a big one though.
Yeah. Hi, Alejandra. Good to see you. Good. So, Monterrey, Mexico, another fantastic city. Cool. So, before we'll start, as always, guys, you are very welcome to ask questions in the chat. And by the way, thanks a lot for sharing the questions up front, because we have designed this narrative to cover lots of your questions about what are the beta metrics, MQL, or pipeline, etc. So we're going to cover all of them. But if anything specific will come to your mind, just feel free to drop it in the chat, and we'll make sure that we'll cover it. So the first point that we want to discuss is how marketing designs the sales playbooks. And the first thing that comes to my mind is why marketing is even doing this. When I'm hearing I have orchestrated this playbook or these sequences for sales, my first question is why, right? And to be honest, I have never heard from any VP of sales saying, hey, I expect marketing to design our prospecting or engagement playbooks. Yet this happens quite often, and this happens quite often when marketing orchestrates the account-based marketing program. Again, for decades, there was a solid perception that ABM is fully owned marketing initiative where sales are supposed to do something which is more likely to close the deal, so jump on the discovery calls, and the entire pipeline creation sits on the marketing side. And marketing takes over the orchestration, designs everything, designs the touch point sequences, etc. for sales, and here we go, right? And the most typical orchestration, which to be honest, I also was in charge of many years ago. So I just deliberately found that project where I created this. So absolutely, yeah, I'm in charge of this. I designed everything for sales. How the engagement should look like, how, let's say, where VP of sales should engage with the senior buyer, how the sales rep should engage, where the leadership should join, what should we say at each step. And guess what has happened? Again, the story was very simple, right? That was bare to nothing from the sales side engagement, right? Why? Because they have their own plan and their own playbooks, etc. And the perception is, okay, guys, create these meetings for us, drive this awareness, and we'll take care of the rest. But we often spend this time reading the best practices. Hopefully, this is we never share these best practices, so we have maybe we are on the opposite side of ABM best practices, how ABM should be executed. But if you have ever seen the PDFs or the blog posts from the famous ABM vendors, quite often you see the orchestration of the sequences. That is the first touch point that sales should be doing, for example, LinkedIn connection request. Then we send an email, for example, how you can cut costs with super valuable content. Then another email would be like, why us versus your competitor, for example. Then you should, like the sales rep should call and say, hey, is it your top priority? And then we'll send another piece of content, etc. And we assume that this is available nurturing. This is how we create awareness. This is how we warm up people. And the truth to be said, sales could set up these playbooks, but how they are different from the targeted lead generation? Let's be absolutely honest. Not that much, right? And we all know how that playbook performs. Not to say, maybe before we'll move forward to the next point, not to say how our buyers perceive this content. Just let's pause for a second and look at this playbook from the buyer lenses. Let's say we are targeting enterprise organizations and we want to sell to technical teams. We are targeting CTOs, VPs of ITs, people who are managing big IT budgets, big IT teams, and big infrastructure. And then some junior sales rep, they have no clue who is that person, comes to you and tells you, okay, this is how you are going to cut your costs. And this is why you should select us. And why is this is not your kind of top priority? Don't we see the disconnection between the needs and perception of the enterprise buyers and how the engagement is structured? So there is a huge discrepancy between the, let's say, the real value the buyer expects and the type of engagement they prefer versus how this, let's say, cadences are designed. And when these cadences fail, and they inevitably fail, like in our entire history, we have never seen any company that performed well with these cadences. Sales come back to their typical engagement, and then marketing is supposed to either continue running this, let's say, sequences, or blaming sales, or shutting down the program. So what we are going to share next is what sales actually want from marketing and where it's all coming from. Again, we don't want to come here as kind of people who say, okay, this playbook is not working and this is what we think should be done. What we have done in the last couple of years, we interviewed multiple sales leaders, and we have done the same on our live podcast and our full funnel summit. You can see the screenshot, and if you guys would be interested, we can share with you the recordings of these episodes. And we explicitly asked that question. Okay, what do you expect from marketing? What kind of help? What do you want? How do you feel marketing should be helping you with generating enterprise pipeline? So everything that we are going to share next is coming from these conversations with VPs of sales, head of sales, CROs of enterprise B2B companies. So let's come to the point, to 5 major areas where sales needs marketing help.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Passing
thank you.
microphone to you.
We were discussing, as always, just before the podcast, how we are going to split the slides so it's not just one long monologue. And I misunderstood. I understood something else. So that's why I was making that awkward pause. But thank you for passing the mic. So, what we hear over and over again is that it's very hard for sales to break through the noise, to stand out, to be even noticed in the inbox. One of the sales VPs that I spoke to said it very nicely. He said, look, there, if I look at my buyers and I spoke to them, our customers, they tell me like we receive hundreds of these messages, and it's not even about whether this message is personalized, whether this message is something that would attract my attention, the subject line, the contents of it. I don't even read it because I just don't have the time. I only read the messages from the people that I know. And that is the reality that salespeople face from the very outreach, as in this example, all the way to actually trying to win the deals. Another story further down the funnel, let's say, I also remember speaking to another VP of sales who mentioned like we lose on brand. That's what he said. So this was originally a UK company with North American presence, but it wasn't as well known in the United States as the, let's say, the incumbents, the biggest competitors. And so it wasn't perceived as, I don't want to say a serious player, but essentially they perceived it as maybe a European startup or somebody that's not maybe as relevant to them as they want to, especially enterprise buyers don't like to take a risk on an unknown brand. So brand awareness is one of the top challenges that sales need help with. Change management content. A lot of sales, what do we mean by change management content? We mean that in a majority of cases, the buyers have the status quo. So we know that buyers are not really buyers majority of their time. They are people who do their job, who are paid to do their job well, and they are dealing with their issues. It's only when there is an internal, let's say, change in priorities or something happens, some sort of a business trigger that drives their priorities to change, that they might start looking for a solution. And so, in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that people accept status quo, right? So, we all live, depending on the area of our lives or our work, we all accept status quo. It's just, it's impossible to change everything. And in a lot of cases, in enterprise context, there's so many things that that can be improved, but there are only a few priorities. So helping buyers, even just making them aware that things can be done differently. What is the cost of inaction? What is basically mm, let's say what may be some of the more progressive companies or people who are their peers who are in a similar position at our companies are doing differently, and why they should also consider that. That's what we mean by change management, right? The third one is account insights. And we spoke about it in different contexts multiple times about this phenomenon of account blindness. Now, the worst possible example that you have in a lot of companies, and I mean we've seen it many times, is we speak to marketing and marketing says, hey, sales, we're doing all this activities to generate these leads, to warm them up, and then we pass them to sales, and then sales ignore them. And then we go to sales and we speak to them, and they say, hey, you know what? I've been assigned these prospects, contacts even, without any context. I don't know why I've been assigned this. I don't know what has happened other than some weird marketing campaign codes that I don't know how to read. I don't know what they mean. I have no context. So let alone that maybe I've tried to follow up with some of those leads and they didn't respond, like having basically the insight into the account, And having this in a more holistic way is what sales need. And so from all the marketing engagement that might be relevant for sales, to all the account research that might have been done, to why did we even select this account, why do we believe it's a fit, did we observe some signals, etc., etc. Having all those insights, in one place is very helpful for, and I will shut this down so it doesn't happen again, is what sales need. Fourth one is once they start engaging with their champion, it's actually where the battle for a lot of salespeople only starts, where for a lot of marketing teams, it completely ends. Oh, we have a sales discovery call, or maybe already a qualified opportunity. That's it, right? We can celebrate, but it's actually where the most difficult job for sales starts, is because maybe we have an interest from a champion, but this champion now has to sell this internally. We spoke about the status quo. We still spoke about priorities in those accounts, executive priorities, business priorities, etc. So how can that champion now show that this initiative, this solution aligns with a high priority business objective, that it's worthwhile, that the cost of doing nothing is worthwhile for us to pay attention, that we cannot ignore or postpone it, and that the ROI of implementing that solution is going to be, again, significant for us to care and in line with our priorities. So this is the role of buyer enablement content. Even if as a marketing team, we can help our sales colleagues to create business cases that answer the questions that I just mentioned, this is already going to be a huge help. And they obviously are the ones who have the information, but helping create this piece of content and helping them then distribute that to the buying committee members is a huge help in accelerating the deal and helping win that deal. And then the final one is the clear marketing message. And basically, if we look at our target accounts and the way that we are usually messaging them, unfortunately, it's a lot of times kind of a generic message. The one that we all receive in our inboxes, hey, we are such and such, and we can help you. Well, I see that your full funnel is also an agency, and we help agency land whatever 10 calls a month or whatever. I don't even know. I don't read those emails, and it's always a number one and a number two and a number three. But aligning the marketing message with the target accounts, the target account clusters, having cohesive message across the different channels, from the content that we use to warm those accounts up all the way to the specific buyers, aligning that with their needs, is also something that sales appreciate a lot. Both content, like Andrei mentioned, that summit session that we had with those sales leaders, and one of the patterns that we heard a lot was having relevant content that they can share, help create the awareness, but also show not only what the solution can do in terms of features, but also how the solution can actually help solve the real problems that these customers have. So this is what we hear over and over again from our clients when we speak to salespeople. So let's see now, why do actually sales, when we try to, as marketers, try to run initiatives and work together with them, why do they push back? Why do they not always jump on it as we would like them to?
So this is the second part, right? Obviously, there could be one fundamental problem that we are not going to cover here, but it could be the main reason. And this is the organizational culture. If your organization is old enough and big, and for years marketing's role has been sales order takers. Marketing was treated as arts and crafts department, as cost center. To be honest, changing this is very hard, and that could be a particular reason for the sales pushback. And I honestly, I'm observing a lot of corporations today, and unfortunately, and we have, let's say, half of our portfolio are enterprise clients, and this could be the case for too many organizations, unfortunately. And if this is true, we have covered, let's say, the only framework we know that helps with this change management is through gradual seeding the gray phase, finding your change agents, and doing small scope pilot programs. This is what we have covered on our webinar a month ago. So if you guys didn't watch it, feel free to reach out and I will send the recording. And if that's not the case, then sales pushback could be happening because of one of these 5 reasons. In most cases, this is what we have observed. One is the protective mindset. This is happening, and let's say the sign, the red flag of it, when sales, if, for example, if you ask sales, hey, can we interview this account? Can we run customer research? Can we talk to the buying committee members? And sales immediately say, no, these are my contacts. We don't need to bother them, etc., etc. This is a huge red flag. Whatever, again, this could be an organizational issue, a bigger issue, or maybe this could be an issue of a particular persona, but quite often there is a root reason for this, and this is the kind of credit issue. So sales, they want to kind of, let's say, crown their roots in the organization, show that they are irreplaceable, let's say, resource, and these are their connections. So it's just purely because of them this client is staying with the company. So this is another part of the organizational issue that you need to address, but potentially you can leverage, you can start engaging with let's say other sales reps or with other clients and show how you create the case studies, etc., and address this issue on the bigger level, right? This is the first one. The next one that we often observe is the domain knowledge, Vlad, right? This is particularly happening in many companies where marketers join the company from completely different field, not understanding the target audience, the market, and the product. And that's why I know you have had some experiences with people who are joining, let's say, technical products that are sold to the technical team. So maybe you can share just a few anecdotes.
There is actually not to, let's say, it's not the fault of marketers in most cases. It's basically you join the organization. If you join as a salesperson, you will get onboarding on the sales process. Obviously, you will join some discovery calls with maybe more senior colleagues. You will have the education about the product, etc. As a marketer, you often don't really get it. It should be part of the onboarding for sure, but it isn't. And what is the consequence if you don't have that domain knowledge, if you don't understand the real industry, the industry pains, the customer buying process, their challenges, etc., firsthand, like sales understand it because they're in the trenches every day, and then you try to, let's say, create a piece of content to help sales or craft a message, it's going to be considered irrelevant because, yeah, if you don't have that knowledge, it's difficult. And the story that Andrei refers to was when we were working with someone who was supposed to create a program that is supposed to engage, let's say, technical buyers. And these technical buyers are like software engineer, like part of the software engineering team. And I mean, it's like, first of all, this is a very difficult buyers to engage because they kind of mistrust, they're skeptical, they mistrust kind of sales and marketing, anything that's salesy and marketingy, all right? But also because they actually, who they do trust and who they respect are their peers, are people who experts, let's say, people who have the knowledge. So it's really, really hard to create any meaningful program when you lack that knowledge. And in that case, just to run the story, we solved it by engaging immediately with subject matter expert who really helped us get that program off the ground. And I think when it comes to that, it's kind of like also a bit of a self-perpetuating problem. Like if you combine this with what Andrei explained, like a protective mindset, if there is a lack of trust in the organization between sales and marketing, so sales kind of have given up and don't want to give access to their customers. They don't want to spend time to actually pass that knowledge along. There are no structured programs. It becomes very difficult. It's kind of a self-perpetuating problem because we don't have the knowledge. We try things, they don't land, and then we even have less trust or less interest from sales to work with us, and that is kind of a vicious circle that gets created. And I think related to that, knowledge is the knowledge of the customers and the market and the industry, the product. The other one is the sales challenges and the sales process. What's actually happening in those sales teams? What is the process? What are their top priorities and challenges that they have to deal with? Because if you don't know that, one, it can seem if you're not really even asking about it, if you're not really aware of those problems, it may seem to sales that you don't care, but also it's really, as a marketer, you know that it's very difficult to present a solution to your customer, to a prospect, if you don't understand that problem. The first thing everybody says, know your customer, right? Well, if you want to suggest a collaboration to sales, and you don't know their priorities and challenges, you have the same problem essentially. It's very difficult. So the better you understand their challenges, the easier it will be for you to present a solution, because solution doesn't exist without the problem. So
And
maybe
I think this is where the main disconnection happens, right? It's when you design the playbooks and you say, "Hey, this is what we are going to do," but sales, okay, come on, guys, this is not what we actually need, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is where the
and it's, I think, but that's another thing, and that's kind of also depends on the maturity of a person and their experience, and the complexity of the organization that they worked in. But there is a bit of a kind of a naive also approach to change management, right? So we all know that people don't change just because you ask them to. People don't do things just because you ask them to, unless maybe they're young kids and and they're disciplined. But even then, so we know that that's the case. So by approaching it in that kind of hey, this is what you should do, and expecting them to just listen and follow what your suggestions, I think it's kind of also a little bit naive, right? So we know that that change requires much more, and we'll dive a little bit in more detail into that as well. But I think there is a core problem here. I think maybe Andrei, you can address this. Like the core issue has to do with incentives and the KPIs.
Yeah. So again, like we spoke about the playbooks, right? If I have different KPIs, sales are in charge of revenue, and in case of marketing is not anyhow tied to revenue, we have a huge disconnect. So quite often, like we all know that we need to work on brand. And this is not discussable, right? We all know this is essential. Let's say if we come to sales and say, hey guys, we want to involve you into thought leadership and we want you to run content distribution. We created this piece of content, right? We want you to send this piece of content to your key accounts. Then the main question is, okay, but how is it going to help me to hit my revenue targets? And this is always the case, right? So for example, we say, okay, we think you guys should be doing this. But let's say if our KPIs, and the worst thing what is happening, and we have observed this a couple of times, when marketing comes to the board meeting and reports on brand traffic, on positions, on traffic from LLMs, how we kind of raised our visibility across LLMs, all of that stuff. And so we present, like we created new pieces of content, we created a new, let's say, product documentation, etc. So lots of marketing wins are happening, and it's true, these are the wins, but at the same time the sales team is missing revenue targets. We have a huge disconnect. So on this, like, just let's think for a second how this is perceived on sales side. Okay, these guys are celebrating all of that stuff, but this stuff is not helping us to hit our revenue targets. And then after this, if we are coming and saying, hey, this is what we think you should be doing, they would say, okay, guys, first of all, close some deals, bring some millions in revenue, and then you'll tell us what to do. And this is what we have heard from the sales leaders. So this is not just, to be honest, I have heard this as well a couple of times and been a part of these discussions 19 years ago when I started in sales at Kimberly-Clark. So this is kind of the sad reality, and these are the main 5 reasons of why sales is pushing back. So let's move to the solution part, the most important, right? So we brought a couple of examples here, and then we'll cover them one by one. Let's start with the first one, Vlad, with the fundamental alignment, because I think without it, everything, all the rest won't be that much helpful.
I think the fundamental alignment or foundational alignment here is really about, are we working on the same goals and are we working on the same market? I mean, to put it extremely simply, right? So if our goals are, let's say, we spoke about things like, we need, as a sales, our top priority is, let's say, to break into the enterprise segment, and the biggest difficulty that we have is getting attention from the senior buyers because of the lack of brand awareness. We are not one of the biggest brands there. Well, that suddenly becomes a goal that we can align on. As marketing, we can help sales with that goal. So that's like the first step. Second step is, okay, you mentioned enterprise accounts. What do you actually mean? Like, is this about billion? Is it about 5 billion? Like, what is the meaning of enterprise accounts for you? And it's different for every organization, and even for every region. An enterprise account in North America is going to be much larger than an enterprise account in Europe, for example, or Asia. Next, you want to understand not only the firmographics, such as the size of those accounts, maybe their industries, etc., but actually what are the common use cases where we have a good chance to win, where we have some competitive advantage. Like, sales know this because they have conversations with buyers and they know that these companies are looking for solutions for A, B, and C. A use case as in, I am looking to solve these challenges because I'm looking to implement, let's say, account-based marketing because my use case is I need to break into enterprise segment, right? And now I start digging into that and say, hey, we have these different use cases. You have this use case, you have another one, and let's say competitor displacement, there's merger and acquisitions, whatever. But where do we actually win better? Like, if you look at these deals, we have our solution may be a better fit for some. Maybe we might have some competitive advantage in some use cases versus the others. And sales will know that too. Like, when I have this, then I know I have a better chance to win when I have the other situation. So drilling down from that use case to understanding, breaking this down, understanding how I should align my content and messaging. So what are the real challenges? What are the priorities? But also, what are maybe some of the signals that I can use to detect whether these accounts are actually exhibiting, or whether they are experiencing some of these needs and issues, whether the timing might be right for us to break into those accounts. All of the things that I can use now to start prioritizing my target accounts, and actually align not only on the goals, but also like, are we going after the same market? Are we going after the same accounts? And then finally, also, if sales is telling me these are the top use cases, this is how I can recognize it, I can also now start aligning the content and messaging with those target accounts. So this is like a very, very, on a very basic level, is like, okay, what does it mean, that fundamental alignment, right? Are we working on the same goals and same accounts? Are we using the same content messaging, or at least on the same topic, looking in the same direction? And also, I think important is, and we'll dive into that as well, is, okay, how are we going to be creating awareness in those accounts? How are we going to be, moving from that initial engagement and starting conversations? How are we going to move into discovery calls and later on? So for basically this whole process, what are going to be the activities that we run? What is expected from marketing? What is expected from sales? Which comes as a next point when we start planning.
Yeah. So basically, what we are going to share next with you are the tactical solutions, or what we call the lowest hanging fruits, right? Something that you can implement relatively easily and relatively fast. Fundamental alignment is hard, and this is kind of ongoing exercise, ongoing process, right? But the other points that we are going to show, they are tactical ones. So the first one is the planning. It could be quarter planning, monthly planning, whatever. But the core point here is that you need to do it together. We know that, and by the way, quick question to you guys. Who has ever been a part of sales territory planning? Just type plus or minus. Plus if you have been invited to it, and minus if you have never been invited to the territory sales planning. And the same, so let's see how many replies we'll get. No, Amy, no, Sophia, no, Chris, yes, cool, Natalia, yes, cool, Alexander, no. So this is the reality, right? Marketing often is not part of it. Carrie, yes. And now another question. Who has ever invited sales and they actually joined your, let's say, quarter marketing planning or your marketing strategy sessions? Again, type plus if sales have ever joined you and actively participated in planning, and minus if no. Curious to see. Okay, cool. So we have some pluses. So this is not bad. This is not bad. So it's good if it's happening in your organizations, because what we observe, and especially again, this is the truth for the bigger organizations, is that marketing and sales planning is absolutely silent. Sales do their territory planning, marketing does their strategy planning, and if marketing has multiple departments, let's say content, brand, demand, communications, etc., even misalignment happens there. We have observed we have observed this in the bigger corporations. Now, in reality, the first step here is just doing this all of this together. If we are doing the territory planning and we want to select the accounts, which accounts we are going to select, from what markets, from what verticals, and even better, what should be our primary use case? This is the typical approach that we take, right? Next, can we back our decisions by data? Because quite often these are more, I don't know how to explain it. These are more like gut feeling decisions. So whatever, we see this trend, so let's go after this vertical, or we're feeling that these accounts would be better fit, or we just sourced, let's say, technology, and this is the set of accounts that we have defined. But why not backing our decisions by data, by real data? For example, running sales pipeline velocity for different verticals, for different use cases, for different markets, and seeing where we have a better velocity, where we have higher win rates, compare this, let's say, enterprise to SMB, where we have shorter sales cycles, where our average contract value is higher, where we historically generate better pipeline, right? So quite often, like when we back this by data, and this already involves the cross-functional collaboration because we can invite analysts or RevOps to bring this data to us, we can make much better decisions, right? And then define the next step together would be, okay, what should be our account qualification criteria? This is the next point that we were going to cover, right? Then how can we identify which of these accounts are engaged or aware of us? Because sales will always complain about lack of awareness among target accounts. This is kind of inevitable evergreen problem. But how can we measure this brand awareness? And again, I have seen some people on LinkedIn who claim how they, like, let's say, the formulas for brand awareness, but just bring these formulas or these reports to sales, and you'll immediately see the pushback. The only right answer to this question, and maybe I'm wrong here, but this is kind of comes from our entire experience. The best answer to this question is sitting down together with sales and mapping out the criteria of engaged accounts, what behavior and what engagement an account should demonstrate, what, let's say, on the account level, on the contact level, so we can call this account vendor aware or being aware of us. This is the right way how you measure the brand awareness among strategic accounts, right? Next, defining what would be the core priorities, like Vlad said. Maybe it's brand awareness, maybe it's deal acceleration, because quite often it's like you have pipeline, but sales are not progressing, the deals are not closing it enough. Why? Because there is no good buyer enablement, right? Or there is simply no process where marketing and sales work together on planning the next steps for accounts and how everybody could contribute to the deal progress, right? And what should be the focus for our go-to-market for the planning period? So these are the keys, right? And when it's happening in, like, when you're doing this as a cross-functional team, then you come to the consensus, and then you all together can decide if it's what you have planned, is it working or is it not working, not just blaming each other and then or presenting on the board meeting the completely disconnected plans, right, that have nothing with the needs of each other. So this is the kind of, again, this was strategical but at the same time tactical point. Now let's move forward to some tactical solutions that you can implement relatively fast.
So the one we kind of already mentioned is if we want to align on the target accounts, let's really define what that means. How do we what are the specific criteria that we can use to say, hey, this is an account that sales will want to work on. This is an account that we consider a good fit. And there is a term that is used in some organization called sales accepted lead, right? Well, let's define that so that the majority of the leads that we generate become sales accepted, right? So that there is no pushback, that there is no discussion later on. It removes so much waste from the whole process. It helps you with your targeting. It helps you with your messaging. It helps you really focus on the same accounts. And what I mean here by criteria, we have here a simple example from ourselves, and it will be a little bit more complex in most organizations. We are a small consulting company, and we are very much focused on one niche. But in other organizations, it may be a little bit more complex. And what we like to note down are the qualification criteria, the firmographics criteria, and these are criteria that can even be extracted from the CRM, like basically looking at the won deals, sorting them by revenue that they generated, then taking, let's say, the top 20% that make up, let's say, 80% of revenue, whether this is like top 10 that make up top 70 or whatever, but like the biggest ones, then looking at calling that a tier 1, then looking at the next chunk, calling that a tier 2, let's say, and then the last, let's say, maybe a bunch of accounts that altogether generate 20% of revenue, we may call them tier 3, and then looking what they have in common from the firmographics. I mean, this is an exercise that you might be able to do even without necessarily sales input, but it would definitely be good to review this with sales. The next thing are criteria that are specific to your business, to your company, to this type of market. So, for example, in our case, the size of the organization could be important, but what's even more important is the size of the marketing team, right? So you might have a large organization. I don't know, for example, a lot of software development companies traditionally didn't used to have a marketing department. They had a very small marketing department, right? Whereas you had, other types of companies with larger departments. In our case, for example, the size of the deal size, right? The average, not our deal size, but the average deal size of our prospect is an important criterion for us. For us, it doesn't really make sense to work with companies that have an annual deal size that is smaller than 30, 50K, right? Complex ABM that is supposed to help you engage multiple buyers and takes, multiple teams to work together, really starts paying off from that deal size, et cetera, et cetera. So specific criteria that are relevant to you, capturing the buying committee. And okay, we had different pieces diving more details, but not just generic roles. In a lot of organization, you will be like, oh, it's the C-suite almost. I mean, this is something that I hear very often. It's like, oh, it's the CEO or maybe the COO, CFO, whomever might be that CIO or the chief IT person, right? I mean, are they really the ones who are deciding? Maybe yes, when they're involved, but who are the other ones? Because especially as marketing for us, when we are talking about challenges, when we are marketing really in the top of the funnel, creating that awareness, very often we really need to understand also who are the potential champions or people who can recommend us in organizations, which are not usually not the top executives. So naming that buying committee, understanding their roles and their key KPIs is an important part of that. And also important is to look at the disqualification criteria. So the best way to do this is you sit together with sales, you look at won deals and you discuss like what were the common patterns, and you extract the qualification criteria, and then you look at the lost deals, and then you discuss, okay, what was specific about those accounts or those situations that made us not be competitive there, and are there any patterns that we should take when we are looking at new accounts to maybe deprioritize them? So disqualification or at least deprioritization criteria. So this is something that you can definitely do with sales, help you trim the targeting in the market so you're focusing on the right accounts, and avoid discussions later on when you say, hey, we have this opportunity. Well, no, it's not a good fit. You don't want to even have that.
So the second tactical solution is joint content planning. Quite often we hear from marketing that the sales team doesn't want to use marketing collateral, marketing posts, PDFs, etc. And again, we spoke a lot about the reasons why it might be happening. But this could be solved relatively easily when you do, like we just discussed, the planning together. Part of this planning could be the content planning, and you can break it down into 3 areas, right? What is the, let's say, what are the ongoing needs of our buyers? What are the ongoing interests? What is something that we can create that can attract an attention of a broader audience of our target buyers, right? Which might be sitting in one-to-many layer. Then one-to-few, if we are focusing on specific use case, specific subset of accounts, right? What might be relevant for these specific accounts? What maybe specific challenges, specific interests they might be having, and what we can create. And lastly, one-to-one content, right? We can review the existing deals, or we can review the most engaged accounts, and then think about what can help us, what types of content can help us to actually to share with the buyers, so they would be interested in talking to us, or what could help them with the internal conversations, right, as a part of buyer enablement to sell our product internally. And when you have this discussion with sales, quite often you'll see that the needs or the ideas they are sharing were not included into your content plan. Why? Again, there could be multiple reasons. One of the most popular is that content planning historically is aligned with the product marketing, and the first thing that we are carrying is the organic reach, which is, again, today and in the upcoming years, we need to completely switch from that strategy because of the change in and drops in the organic traffic because of LLMs, right? But the entire point, historically, we were looking for the keywords, we were thinking about the organic traffic, making sure that our content would be ranked, and quite often it's completely disconnected with what sales need. How that could be solved? You can see a snippet of a simple exercise that we have done with Vlad this quarter, and you can see the name of the webinar, How to Survive as a B2B CMO and Generate Enterprise Pipeline in the AI Era. And then basically what we were doing, we were discussing together about the jobs to be done of the buyer persona, what is the biggest challenge, the root reasons, what are the different ways to solve this challenge, what our buyers might be interested. Obviously, we also validated this with, let's say, with the buyer personas that we were thinking about. And when we were going through it, right, we were thinking about what resources could be helpful, and we were thinking in these three lenses. This is important, right? What pieces of content would be appealing to a broader group? What pieces of content would be appealing to a smaller group? And then later, for specific accounts, what could help them to kind of initiate that change management in their organization? So the quickest fix to it is creating a good agenda, creating a questionnaire, or maybe you already have one, and invite your sales colleagues to the content planning and start discussing with them. It's also, we always recommend, aside from involving sales, involving somebody who is your subject matter expert, a person who used to work as your target buyer persona, person who has deep domain knowledge, and then you can basically collect the ideas from multiple sites and create a good content that is likely to be used by sales. So just think about it, and the only recommendation here is to make it a structured meeting, right? Not just, okay, let's brainstorm what might be helpful, but think about what questions would be good to discuss on that session, how can you uncover the necessary topics, and then prioritize it, right? That's the key. Let's move to another topic.
Here it's all about planning. What are the activities that we will need to use, channels, activities, content that we're going to use to create awareness with these accounts, to get information about their priorities and challenges, and to then create actually discovery calls, turning that engagement into conversations, turning that into discovery calls, etc. And it's joint planning because sales and marketing both have a role in each of these steps. When it comes to, for example, awareness creation, Andrei has just shared how we could plan content together. So we need to make sure this content is relevant for those target accounts. But then we can go a step further and ask ourselves, okay, how can we create content that will help sales engage with target accounts. So we often like including content that will be shared, social content that will be shared from the profiles of the salespeople, so that they can use that to create awareness with target buyers and position themselves more as, let's say, an industry peer or an expert, somebody who's educating about the industry, not just knocking on your door and trying to sell you something. We often also include, you saw Andrei presenting our planning where we included a webinar or an event. This is another great opportunity for sales to engage before the event, during the event, and after the event. So how can we use that content in a way that helps sales? How can sales also help us distribute that content if you're sharing via their profiles? For example, maybe we can, if you have the budget, maybe we can run some thought leadership ads behind it and things like that. How can maybe sales help us invite people to that event or a webinar? The second question is, I said like awareness. The second question is, we have awareness, or these accounts know who we are, but we are not necessarily sure what their top priorities and challenges are. Are they even in the market right now? So sitting together with sales and asking, like, what are the questions that you want to know about those target accounts? What is the information that you're looking for when you, if you had to bet your compensation on an account, what is the information that you would like to know? If you had to create a perfect pitch for that account, completely personalized, what will you like? What will you need to know before you will be able to do that? And then mapping those questions to also thinking about, okay, we are going to run a number of activities for marketing. Can we actually leverage those activities to get this information that sales is looking for? For example, can we add that to a poll of our webinar or a sign up in a sign up form? Or maybe we can let sales reach out to people who have registered for that webinar and ask them, hey, what is the one thing that you're looking to learn during that webinar? What's the top priority challenge, etc. And then, so how can we leverage marketing touch points? How can sales leverage? How can we work together? So these touch points also become another touch point for sales, maybe where sales can get some information. Maybe we can work together with sales on co-creation. Like maybe we can let sales ask their buyers for a quote, which is another thing we did when we were promoting this webinar. We reached out to our audience. Maybe some of you have actually contributed to this common research, co-created research about how the companies, B2B companies, are using AI these days. Excuse me, generative AI these days, and which is another point of interaction, another way to find out. And finally, how can we leverage this? What will be the activities to then create opportunities, create discovery calls and opportunities with those buyers? Can we maybe offer them some sort of a bridge activity after that webinar, or when we see that they are highly engaged and we see that they have a need? For example, some of our clients have turned this initial content collaboration into some sort of market research, which was a marketing initiative, but then they worked with sales when they had an opportunity to interview buyers. So they kind of turned that research also into early discovery, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all about looking at the different levels of intent, essentially. From no intent, they don't even know who we are. Okay, what is the appropriate action? There is to create awareness, right? We can't just cold pitch them. We know that doesn't work. Up to, hey, they're highly engaged, they seem to have a need, they're showing all the signals, there is initial relationship. Okay, what can we do now if they're not yet raising their hand to turn that into the next discovery step? So one last point that I wanted to share here is to make it easier for you. Look at the existing programs. Look at what's planned. Very frequently, I mean, this is one of the questions we will all ask our clients when we're planning a joint program is, okay, let's look at what's planned in terms of the content that is going to be produced. Let's look at what are the events that maybe your sales is going to attend, or events that your team is going to launch during this period. And let's see whether we can use some of those. Maybe we can turn that event into a more account-based event. Maybe we can align the topic of it with the topic that we know we heard from sales is the top priority topic that we are focusing on within this program. And with that, you can actually create a program that makes that helps you, because sales is going to be engaged, is going to be more relevant. You're going to have better results and help sales with awareness and with multiple touch points. And I think the only thing here is to just make sure that it's very, very clear who needs to do what. To document this very clearly, what are the different steps and who will need to do what. You see on this diagram, different faces are actually real faces from people, and how they are actually assigned to the different tasks, different activities.
And the last point before we'll answer some of your questions, because I believe the majority of them we have addressed with this presentation. The last point is developing shared metrics and dashboards. Sales will still have their own reports. Marketing will have own reports. But we need to have something in the middle that helps us to present, to share, and to track also the joint impact on pipeline and revenue creation, the joint progression. If we plan to run any specific activities together, what would be the most meaningful metrics? We always recommend, especially if there would be something like account-based marketing, or even doesn't necessarily need to be account-based marketing, any program where marketing and sales are going to run the playbook together, the program together, right? What are our success metrics? What do we want to get out of it? What are some of our leading indicators? And I think leading indicators are often missed. Why? Why there could be multiple reasons, but without leading indicators, we end up with more kind of random acts / ad hoc program execution. Even today, I had a call with Philo, VP of Marketing, and he said to me, we tried to do some sort of ABM. We designed the program, but there is no visibility on how many touch points sales actually did. And also we have no visibility on how many, let's say, activities that marketing was supposed to do. We don't have this. So everybody says, I have done this, I have done that, but there is no holistic overview, right? And then we can't really make good decisions. What we are running, is it working or no? Did we put enough effort into this program or no? Because quite often the problem, and we all know this subconsciously, that quite often the programs are not working because we are not putting enough effort to make it work, right? So what are our success metrics? What are our leading indicators? And what are our lagging indicators? And lagging indicators could be account engagement, account penetration, discovery calls booked, pipeline created, revenue. The key point, and we always recommend to do this, connecting the dots. Even if there would be some, let's say, thought leadership program and you want to involve sales, make sure that there is a clear progression from trend to demand to pipeline, right? How we are going to capture this engagement and how then we can proceed to conversations. So there is always connection between, let's say, top of the funnel activities to revenue creation. This would be essential. And before we'll move to questions, quick announcement. So next week we'll have a special guest, VP of Marketing from Aligned, Ashley Levine, and we're going to talk about how to balance and plan always on and strategic marketing programs. So Ashley built, we're now aligned and we have been partnering with them for quite a long time. And they started as founder-led and then sales-led organization, and Ashley built a marketing team from scratch. So I think for many of you, it would be an interesting episode with tons of insights how to refine your marketing planning for 2026. So stay tuned. And now let's move to the Q&A. But before we'll answer the first question, let us know, guys, how did you like the episode? Just share with us your feedback in the chat. And we can start with the first question from Amy. Would you pick up this one, Vlad?
Sure. So how does the institution of the chief growth officer or the chief revenue officer roles aid sales and marketing disconnect or connect or doesn't? I mean, it's different organizations will implement this role differently, but unfortunately, a lot of organizations will implement the role of a chief, especially a chief revenue officer, will be a person with a sales background. And it doesn't mean that, again, it will very much depend on their experience, their mindset, etc. But when this person becomes in charge of both marketing and sales, which is not always the case when you have a CMO who is reporting into the CEO, it doesn't have to be. But sometimes it does happen that this person becomes in charge of both marketing and sales. If they're with a sales background, we've seen this happen several times when even though the marketing has started to work closer with sales, have started to work on more long-term programs to generate future pipeline, let's say, to generate long-term results. These programs were killed and switched to, let's say, leads kind of programs where it's easy to attribute and easy to measure. But it really depends on that person. In general, we've seen always better situation where the marketing doesn't report into sales, basically.
And we have quite a lot of community questions. So some of them we have already addressed, the tactical ways to fix the ignorance, the best KPI, MQL or pipeline. I think this is a good one, and we have discussed it a couple of times. The most important point here is moving from measuring or putting MQL as your core marketing success metric. Where MQL could be handy when you measure account engagement, when you measure account penetration, right? So when you mark a contact as MQL, what should it mean in a nutshell? That this person works for a company that fits your ICP criteria, right? That could be a good indicator, but it shouldn't be an indicator, or it shouldn't be a trigger for sales outreach. Hey, this person was marked as MQL, assigned to SDR, and expect them to close the deal. So as the maybe as the lagging indicator, as the part of, let's say, account engagement program, it could be a good one with this nuance that it shouldn't trigger the sales outreach, right? So, but from again, from the bigger perspective, obviously the core metric is not even pipeline, it's revenue, because ultimately if your pipeline is not converted into revenue, then we're doing something wrong, right? So from that perspective, the core metric is revenue, but there should be a path to revenue, right? From print to pipeline creation, where MQL with the right definition could be a part of it.
I think, like, speaking about MQLs, the first question is interesting. I think it's kind of similar to what Andrei just responded to, but it's phrased interestingly. What should be an ideal definition of MQL so that sales considered it immediately worth pursuing? And I think one answer to that is that, well, let's agree that with sales, right? So let's together define when should an account be considered by sale or pursuing? What is the kind of engagement? What is the kind of insight that we should have about that account for them to consider this worth pursuing. And they may say, just to kind of preempt this, if you're thinking, yeah, but they will just say, an account that's raising the hand and wants to talk to sales about our product. Obviously, like that's what each and every salesperson wants. And by the way, this is how some companies actually define MQLs, but that's a totally another topic. But I think if you do end up in a situation where sale might respond with something like that, it's worth like, okay, but what if you had the right type of company, the right type of person who is multiple time visitor on website, who came to an event and asked questions about the challenges that we can help them solve? Would that be relevant? And starting conversation from there, like, okay, so it's not just somebody who says, hey, I want to talk about your product, and then really shaping and defining this together, what it could actually mean to be worth pursuing. Just wanted to drop that.
And I think we can just pick the last one about holding sales accountable. I think it's a good question. And the truth is that in reality, we have no control over it. And we can't really make them accountable until they would, A, co-create the program with us, and B, they will clearly see how the program that we are going to execute together will hit their targets. C, they will see some early wins, even small wins. This is essential to keep sales momentum. And D, when we together define the success metrics, break down these metrics into some actions, into some leading indicators, what we want to do. And then as the team, set up the weekly targets. Okay, these are the tasks and these are the activities, or let's say the volume that we want to pursue this week. Are we all agreed that we're all agreeing that we are going to commit to these targets? Okay, cool. And if you already foresee that there could be a problem with making sure that sales are accountable, what comes handy is daily stand-ups. Just 10 minutes meetings, nothing specific, even could be shorter ones. It's all about, okay, hey, how's your day looking like? What are you going to do today? How many activities you are going to execute today? How many or what specific tasks? Is there anything that is standing on your way? Is there anything that is blocking you? And that's it. And reporting on the progress of the past day. So sometimes we need to force this kind of accountability with these meetings. But again, there are the prerequisites that I have mentioned, and this is what we have covered today. If I want to keep them accountable, we need to co-create with them. We need to show them how the program solves their challenges, how the program helps them to hit their targets, and then define together success metrics and the core activities, or like what was Vlad presenting, the joint playbook, right? What we are going to do, and making it measurable. And then either creating the joint dashboard, creating the joint dashboards and maybe setting up this daily stand-ups, at least the weekly meetings, right? This is the bare minimum, but in ideal scenario, the daily stand-ups could come handy as well. Cool. We have covered everything. If, like we mentioned, if there would be anything, any resource that you guys would like to get from us, anything that we have shared today or mentioned, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or send us an email. And next week, we are going to host an Ashley, and hope to see you all again. Have a great rest of the week, and thanks a lot for coming. Take care.
Bye.